G'day everybody, Ben Heffernan here from Mildura, Victoria, Australia. Well, actually today I'm in Broken Hill, but I am based in Mildura. And now that I've given you all that useless information, hey, have you ever done one of those videos, or paintings let's say, I'm doing the video now, but one of those paintings where you really got a great idea and you really want to execute, and then as you're painting, you're getting quite excited, it's all happening for you. Suddenly you start to watch it materialize before your very eyes into an absolute train wreck. Well, that's kind of what happened with this one. And as I was still filming, I thought, let's see if I can redeem myself, hopefully bring it back, and I'll let you be the judge. So stick around to the end and let's get into it. As you can see, I've got quite a few array of colours there. I've got my medium yellows, I've got some yellow, yellow, some lemon yellow, and some green, some terre verte, which is just a dark green. And I've got some medium green. As you can see, I'm just pretty much randomly squeezing that all over the canvas. Now, while I'm talking about the canvas, it's just a loose leaf piece of canvas that I've torn out of like a sketch pad and taped that down to a bit of MDF so it doesn't move all over the place. Now, I've just grabbed my plastic spatula there that I've got from one of the cheap stores in town, and I'm just dragging that over the canvas like a squeegee. And it's just pulling all those colours that I've applied earlier to the outside and dragging that down. So going from the yellows to the top to the yellow ochres down to the bottom to the terre verte or the dark green down to the bottom. So that way it would just give me that contrast. Now, not too much in the distant future is, as you can see here, I just start playing with it and overworking it. If I had have just stopped when I got to the bottom, I would have been a happy camper. But as it was, I still had a lot of excess paint on the canvas, and here I am just trying to redeem myself, so to speak, and oh, what a mess. Have a look at that. I've just overworked it. I've dragged so much paint. Then I've tried to, as you can see, use a little bit of creative license there to be able to start to use some of the excess paint up, drag it over the canvas, really not doing anything with it or any sort of impact. So as you can see, I'm still persevering. I'm trying to be able to use up some of that paint. I've got some of the darker paint, thinking I could possibly make some leaves. At that stage, I'm thinking about just chucking it out completely. And then I thought, no, persevere and let's start to try something different. So got a little bit of raw umber on my plate there, on my palette, grabbing out my plastic spatula, and I'm just dabbing that raw umber onto the canvas to make up a little, let's say, bush. It's going to be a rose bush or something like that, but at this stage I'm still just ad-libbing. I've pretty much lost all hope of redeeming myself, but I'm going to keep persevering. Got a little bit of gold paint there. I've also used a little bit of raw sienna dark, if you're interested. And as you've seen there, I just screwed up a little bit of the canvas plastic that the canvas is. A lot of my canvases come wrapped in, and I love using that. It adds for a beautiful texture over the canvas, and even on these loose leaf canvas papers as well. Again, I'm going back to the raw, I think it's raw umber there, and I'm just starting to really wet that out. Not too much to the point where you lose, it just goes translucent once it dries, but you keep a lot of the colour, but just use a fair bit of it and a lot of water and just sprinkle that all over, or splatter it all over the canvas. As you can see here, I'm just quite happy to flick that over. I've got one of my older brushes there. It's already pretty much wrecked, which is great, so don't throw them out because they're so handy for doing this sort of let's say spontaneous sort of artwork. Now I've got some light or lemon yellow, and just look how well that splatters all over the canvas there. Now I'll say again, you really have to be able to work that that paint while it's on your saucer. So as you're adding the water, add more paint. You really don't want that paint to lose any consistency when it dries. So as you can see here, I'm really working it. I'm just pushing the water into the paint, and it's just spreading out quite nicely onto the canvas. Gone from some white there onto a little bit of medium yellow to what looks to be a little bit of yellow ochre with a little bit of red or something there mixed in. And now I've got a little bit of rose pink and some magenta. Got one of my trusty old plastic spatulas again from my cheap shop in town. And I'm not watering this down at all. I'm just using the paint as it is. And as you can see, it's going on fairly translucent. So for the texture, I'm really hoping to be able to build that out. So I've got a really strong color that's not see-through at all. And as you can see, I'm just dragging that spatula or palette knife back into the center of the flower, adding some more magenta to the flower and just building that out. I'm just trying to get as much color on there as I possibly can. I want to be able to cancel out that gold and green background that's behind the flower. I find it's easier just to be able to do your backgrounds first. Believe me, it's going to take a lot of the headache out of where you want to position your main subject. And the main subject here is obviously the big pink flower. Okay, so straight from the tube, I've got a bit of light pink there, and I've transitioned over to a 15mm flat brush. And I'm just loading up the brush and just dragging that into the center of my subject, being the big pink flower, as we just said. And just another thing here is that when you're doing your petals, especially with flowers, always work from the outside and then drag them to the inside of your painting. That way you can actually start to paint over the top of where you start to run out of paint on your brush. That's where you want to be able to start to put your new petals in. Now again, I'm falling into the trap of overworking, and pretty much I've done this flower I think at least 3 times. So I've just fast forwarded here so you didn't have to see the whole process again. So I've pretty much painted over it in pink. I thought, look, I'm just going to step away for a minute and I'm going to go to painting the petals, the leaves. So I've used some dark green, some Terra Verte, which I think is just a fancy name for dark green. And I'm just using my good old filbert brush, and I'm just pressing that onto the canvas, as you can see. So I'm just pushing that out and just rolling the brush, and it just makes for a really lovely leaf effect. Just dabbing the brush onto the canvas and then spinning the whole brush around, kind of in a twirling motion. Just spin it in your fingers. Here I'm adding some Monastral Green in the Montmartre brand, and they're not affiliates of mine, so I'm just telling you what paint I'm using. Pretty much for these subjects, I just use any paint that I can get from the cheap stores, just so that you guys can tag along, you can join in with me, paint along with me, and it's not going to break your budget. And you can also get your head around or the feel for how to use these particular paints. Now these are all acrylic. There I've just added again some more yellow, and the fact that these are still wet really helps to blend these different colours over the top. So the Terra Verde as the underneath leaf, then a little bit of Monastral Green, which is a really light green, and then I've switched out to some yellow, still using the filbert brush. Now I've gone back to my light pink, and I'm going to try this rose yet again. Now here's a good example of what I was talking about earlier about doing the outer petals first, and that way you can start to do the inner petals as a feature as it starts to draw your eye into the center of the rose or flower, whatever it might be. And again here I've used some white to go straight onto the petals, just to add a little bit more oomph, or just to bring those petals out a little bit more so that the whole subject stands right out from the background. So there we have it, an artwork that was destined to be an absolute train wreck to something that I'm quite happy with the end result. I love that gold background from the acrylic, and it just goes to show you that it's not a throwaway job just because it's not going right at the start. Thanks for sticking around. Here's a little close-up of my leaves, and I'll see you in the next one.